Subtitles always.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if the only way I can watch it is dubbed, then I guess I have to. But the subtitles, I got no problem reading.
Okay. So if you have the choice, you go for the subs.
Absolutely.
All right. My man. A lot of people are lazy, but some dubs are trash. You know, not that the translation's bad, but it just like doesn't match at all.
Yeah.
And it just takes you out. Like, I can't focus the same way. I'd rather just read it. You know what I mean? And then get the actual... It just fucks up the tone, in my opinion. Even for anime and stuff, it's like... Sometimes it's really weird to get into dubbed versions.
It kind of works with the Sergio Leone movies, but of course those don't have subtitles. They just dub them over because they shot with, whatever actor speaking whatever the native language was, or whatever his or her native language was, and then they would dub them over later. So if you watch a lot of those, or you pay close enough attention in those, sometimes it doesn't really match up, but you kind of have no choice.
In that aspect, you have to accept it,
But no, I'm definitely all in the subtitles. That's fine by me. I think people they want to fuck around on their phone instead of actually watching the movie. And if it's subtitled, they can't pay attention.
I mean, I think I've been like that even before cell phones were prominent the way that they are now, where it's like a computer in your pocket, you know what I mean? I was still, like, back in the day. I remember, I think my grandparents, they rented, because I really wanted to watch Crouching Tiger, right?
Yeah.
We rented it, and I think it was the subtitled version. And then they immediately were like, oh no, we don't want to read. And they took it back to get the dubbed. So then, because I was a kid then, I had to watch the dubbed version. But I was just, that tripped me out, like that it was such a big deal for them to have to read. You know, even at that time. When did that come out? 2000? 2001?
Yeah, and that was kind of a major hit in the States, so it was kind of surprising. But yeah, I know that I think at one point my parents had wanted to check it out, and I told them no, it's all subtitled because it's
Mandarin, or I
think it's Mandarin. Yeah. They're like, oh, I don't know if I can read the entire movie.
Okay,
right. You're missing a great movie. I don't know if they ever saw it.
I mean, Hero is the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's subtitled.
Yeah, well, I think the guy who did Parasite.
Oh, Bong Ho?
Yes. I think he said, that you just have to get over that 1-inch wall of the subtitles to actually enjoy a lot of different movies. But I think the subtitles are what holds people back from actually experiencing a lot of stuff. And it's like you said, it's not just the Hong Kong movies. Like, I've seen tons of movies in French or German or something that were great.
Yeah. Yeah. Can't agree more, man.
Obviously I'm a big Kurosawa fan. All of his movies are in Japanese. That hasn't stopped me from loving them.
If anything, I feel like that you're breaking down these barriers, that subtitles allow you to experience these things that we wouldn't be able to interpret otherwise. So in that aspect, to me, it's always been a special thing because you're, I don't know, thinking outside the box and getting to experience sometimes stuff that is a lot better than things here in the States.
Yeah. And a lot of people seem to have no problem watching plenty of TV with the captions on.
Yeah, like that's like a comfort thing for them, but when you have to have it, then they...
Yeah.
I also do that, though. I watch everything, even if it is in English with subtitles, because I feel like I'm experiencing all of the dialogue as to, like... Especially when you watch something in the theater, obviously they don't have subtitles in the theater and you miss things and you go back and watch. I always watch with the subtitles, like for everything.
Like latter-day Christopher Nolan movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, we did a Tenet episode. That was an intimidating episode to try and do.
But what I told you, what was so funny about it was when I caught it again on HBO.
Is that it sounded fine?
Yeah, even like something like The Dark Knight Rises, where they made a big deal about it. It's like, oh, it sounds fine on HBO. Like when I'm watching in the theater, especially with Tenet, I was like, what the fuck? I feel like I'm missing half of the dialogue. But watching it again, like on HBO, it's fine. Like they went through and they cleaned it up and made it much more intelligible than it is with some shitty sound mix in the cinema. I'm using fancy British terms now. I guess you could say theater. I say cinema.
It's all good, man. No judgment here.
Because I want to be pretentious. Wu had a hard time getting this movie made. And I think that you touched on some of that in your intro.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned him earlier when we were talking about the shitty Van Damme movies. But Choi Hark? I want to make sure I'm saying that right. Anyways, he was the producer on A Better Tomorrow and the second one. Mm-hmm. The two of them weren't getting along. Like they had to cut two separate versions of the film because they had disagreements on how that should go. And then when they did the second one, Hark feels that Wu's cut of A Better Tomorrow 2 ruins the film.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. The movie's fucking awesome. And he asks Wu's producer, Terrence Chang, to fire John Woo off of the movie. Chang refuses, so then Hark basically rejects future ideas for Wu's films, or his ideas for future films. He rejects the ideas that would become Bullet in the Head, which is another very good movie. Once a Thief, which I've only been able to check out once. I think I might have had a copy of it at some point. And then he rejects the basic idea for what is the killer, because he's like, no one wants to see a movie about that.
About a killer.
Have you paid attention to movies in the last 100 years? Yeah. Aren't half of them about killers and violence?
And then it's funny, because you have all of these other films like Leon the Professional that are very clearly inspired by the killer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So don't ever listen to other people. Believe in yourself, in your vision.
And which Wu does, and I think The Killer is the last movie that the two of them work on together. And the reason it got made is because both Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee are under contract to studios, and they step in and kind of put their weight behind it and get both of their respective production companies involved. And that's how the movie gets made. So we were talking about both Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee kind of stepped in and helped get the movie funded and made. And those two had actually been in movies together before. This wasn't the first time that they shared the screen. There was an early 80s film called The Executor that I am not familiar with. But the one that I do want to talk about is City on Fire, which is a Ringo Lam movie from the late 80s, which I think is made just before this, 87, so a couple years before this. And that's another movie that you and I have talked about on this podcast before, because it's pretty much a direct influence on Reservoir Dogs, where Chow Yun-fat's an undercover cop that infiltrates this gang, and in the course of a robbery, he ends up getting shot, like trying to protect the gangster that he's trying to take down. Mm-hmm. And then during the last part of this movie, the gangster played by Danny Lee finds out that Chow Yun-fat was an undercover cop. So it's very much it got a lot of attention because it was a direct influence on Reservoir Dogs. But they're both in that movie, and check that out too. That's another really great movie. You mentioned that he had 90 days to shoot the film. That's double the amount of time that most Hong Kong films shot in. You were laughing when he said that he didn't even have like none of the action scenes were kind of choreographed or pre-visualized.
Yeah, he barely had didn't even have a script really.
Yeah,
it was just on the fly.
Yeah, he only had a treatment basically, and then doesn't do storyboards for action scenes. He just kind of gets there and maps it out as they're setting up.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts. For something that there's so many guns going off and there's so much squibs and pyrotechnics involved with the bullet hits and everything. Like, it's nuts to think that none of that stuff is mapped out.
Yeah.
They would be going over that shit so hardcore in the States, and for safety reasons. But to think that the Hong Kong shoots were just wild. They had no plan. They're kind of shooting. I mean, even a lot of the movie was shot without permits. All the guns are real.
Really?
Yeah. It's very hard to get fake guns and prop guns in Hong Kong at the time, so I think they shipped most of them over from England. They're all real. They have a limited amount of time to shoot certain sequences, so they're just basically just running through the streets with cameras firing fake guns. All the police, all the residents are calling the cops on them, and then the cops show up and then realize, oh, it's a John Woo movie. Apparently a lot of the police officers were big John Woo fans, so then they just kind of let him do his thing. But yeah, all the residents are scared shitless because there's live gunfire happening. Well, I shouldn't say live rounds. There's loud gunfire happening outside. Even the scene where Inspector Lee and his partner are making the buy of the guns,
mm-hmm.
and then that goes south. So Lee chases the guy onto the tram. None of that stuff was permitted. The residents had no idea. The people on the tram had no idea what was going on. So they're all freaking out. They call the police. I think I had read that when the police did show up at one point, Lee and John Woo talked to the commanding officer at the time and convince him to let him continue the film. But it's just nuts, the amount of action that are in those movies, and to think that a lot of that stuff was just kind of shot without
organic.
Yeah.
And for it to be considered a masterpiece and revered, that's amazing, because it's just this seems cool, let's do this.
Yeah, they made up a lot of that stuff on the fly. But the two big, or I should say the three big scenes, action scenes that are in the film, the stuff at the boat race,
mm-hmm.
the shootout at the beach house just before the climax, and obviously the climax in the church. That stuff is all set up and not necessarily pre-planned, but they have plenty of time to shoot all that. They weren't just randomly shooting up a house in the middle of nowhere without the proper permits and without letting the residents know what they were doing. But those would probably almost be better at doing those guerrilla style as opposed to running out on the street firing weapons at guys in downtown.
That's insane, dude.
So I talked about the big action scenes. Here's something for you. The scene in the house towards the end, which we'll get to in a bit.
Okay.
Took 28 days to film.
Just that?
Just that. And they expend 20,000 rounds of ammunition.
That reminds me of, I think he does a shit ton of retakes